This thing rolling.
I've got a story for y'all too after we get off live.
Oh, word. All right, cool.
Are we live right now already?
Not yet. I'll tell you when.
Okay. Okay.
Oh,
The things you overhear.
I'm sure. I'm sure there was some shenanigans going on this past weekend. And
Carolina related.
all right, I've muted that. All right, looks like we're on the YouTubes there. Let me get this out of here. All right,
Live.
we are live. 4 people already watching.
Hey, 4 people. You are the
What's
best
up, 4 people?
You are the best ever, 4 people, whoever you are. Thank you.
All right, we'll give it a couple more minutes. I'm going to go ahead and hit record. And we'll see if we can make this work. Let's see. All right. So first time that we have ever done a coast to coast live. And this is whew. Man, Sherelle, people are already blowing up the chat. Just wanted to pick your brain. So I think our gamble was a smart one for tonight. But look, I am thrilled that Sean and Sherelle are here with me. As always, this is the Coast to Coast podcast. We've never done one of these live, but we're going to do it now because it seems timely. And hey, there is no off season. I've seen that on a shirt somewhere, right, Sherelle?
Yeah, it's on there. I have a couple.
As always, Sean Moran, Sherelle McMillan are joining me. Sean, how you living, man?
doing well.
All right, we're gonna try this again. Sean, how you living, man? We're live. Let's do a retake. We're gonna cut that and edit it, even though we're live.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I mean, you're breaking up a little bit, but you're there. We can feel your energy.
All right. Well, I'm doing good. Happy to be here on YouTube live. I guess last time was pre Duke. So
yeah,
excited to do it again.
Yeah, man, it's been a minute since we've talked. I mean, things have happened, right? Like this has been quite the to do for not just the Tar Heels, but Tar Heel prospects, all kinds of shenanigans around the program. Sherelle, how you feeling, man? You went out and bought a house, and because we haven't had enough going on. So you're like, hey, let me throw some more logs on the fire here. How you feeling?
I'm good. This is going to be one of the last 4 or 5 podcasts on the patio, so I'm feeling a little nostalgic.
All right. So what I'm going to need you to do is I want you to go ahead and get a still shot from your screen right now without you. And that way when you're done, we can always have, you know what I mean? We can always have the shot of your porch, even if you're not on the porch. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That can be your filter for Zoom or whatever.
It's not a bad idea, actually.
Just to mess with people, right? Like just we could pipe in some bird noise like they do with the Masters. It would be legit. Want to shout out everybody who's in the YouTube chat right now. We're already up to 50 people, man. This is crazy. We just decided to do this about an hour ago. So I want to give a special thanks to Ben Sherman and Gregory Hall for kind of guiding me through this and letting me know how this is going to roll. But we felt like, based on the amount of activity around the program right now since the games are over, we felt like this might be a good time to try going live. And if this goes well, maybe we'll get to some of the questions in the chat a little bit later. But if nothing else, I felt like this would be a great time to engage with the listeners of the Coast to Coast podcast in a different way. I'm Joey Powell. You can see it on your screen. For those of you who are listening to this in podcast form, again, bear with us. It's a little different. We're doing a YouTube live tonight, which is a first. So definitely want to make sure we shout out Johnny T-shirt, because even though we're doing this in a kind of a different delivery method, it's still Johnny T-shirt. They're still awesome. They're still consistent. So even while we're toying with some new ideas, Johnny T-shirt is still as strong as ever. So shout out to those folks. And look, I'm not going to lie. I went to New Orleans. I stopped in Johnny T-shirt before I went. I got a really nice re-up. My buddy that went with easy for me to say, that went with me, he dropped like $2 on Johnny T-shirt. Man, my man had like 6 shirts laid out on the bed to pick which one he was going to wear to the Duke game that Saturday night in New Orleans. But fellas, I've actually, in light of all that's going on, I want to kind of start with wrapping up the season. And I think all of our colleagues at Inside Carolina have done a really good job of kind of talking about the games themselves. I wanted to let the dust settle and let us slide in with kind of an overview of the season. And we're going to talk about, obviously, everybody wants to know, everybody who's on YouTube right now and everybody wants to know about what's going on with the roster and who's coming back. We'll get to that. But first things first, I want to kind of talk to you guys. Sure, I want to go to you first. Like, if you could just freestyle for me a little bit on how this season compares to other successful Carolina basketball seasons.
I think it's completely different from really any successful Carolina season, maybe ever. A lot of people point to Matt Doherty's first year at UNC because he had a great success. He had 18 straight wins. He had a really huge win at Duke, but they kind of, where this particular team got better towards the end of the season, they kind of limped towards the finish line and ended up losing in the second round of the NCAA tournament. People talk about Coach Guthridge's first year back in '98. That team made the Final Four, but again, you're talking about arguably two of the most talented players in Carolina history on that particular team. So it's a little different. And then you go to Hubert Davis in this season, in his first year as a head coach, and it started with a whisper, to quote that song from many years ago in the NCAA tournament, because, we regurgitated all this several times over, but just the ability to stay positive, his ability to stay positive, I think really was the story of the season for me personally, because when you have people coming into new roles, you think that eventually they'll kind of get beaten down by it and they'll kind of revert to what everybody else does. We see it in recruiting all the time where there's a kid who you've talked to for a couple of years. He's been a great interview, always calls you back and everything. And he starts getting a couple more offers and things start to change as notoriety, increases. And I thought with Coach Davis that his positivity maybe would leave after some of those big losses and maybe would start to, he would, just maybe change who he was in order to fit what people thought he should be. But he didn't do that. And I think to me, that's the biggest thing is maybe we really shouldn't be too harsh on someone who's starting into a new role. We said last year that he wasn't necessarily the best person for the job, but he was the right person for the job. And I think through year one, you kind of see why, because there are certain things when it comes to being the UNC basketball coach that frankly, other people just can't know. And I know people hate that and it sounds pretentious and it sounds incestual, but it just takes, for this particular job at this time, it took a Carolina person to truly understand it. And then I think the beauty of it is that once it hit and he started doing well, you saw exactly why that was the case. So to me, that was the biggest thing, just watching Hubert Davis's arc over the season, in that it seemed like he was a different coach from what he was at the beginning, but really he was the same coach and we were the ones whose minds had been changed. So that's my big takeaway, I think.
Yeah, man, we were different. I love that. I think that's great perspective. And I definitely want to, I'll speak on behalf of Inside Carolina subscribers, man. I'm sure they probably would not be able to imagine this run with another coach now, considering what we know and what we've seen over the last 6 weeks. Sean, I want to ask you the same thing. Historically, how do you think this run, or this season compares to past successful Carolina seasons?
I mean, I don't think there's really any seasons from the Roy Williams tenure and on that it compares to. Any, for the most part, Final Four tournament run was made by a team where you expected them to, get that far, to potentially win a championship. I think, remarkable is probably an apt word to describe this season. You can probably, go back and pick whatever podcast you want. And I think, even on this one, we kind of agreed, especially coming out of the Miami Wake week, that UNC was nationally irrelevant after really the last, 3 years or 2.5 years. And it was looking, once again, they fell out of the top 25 early on, had some horrendous losses. Defensively, they were in the 100s in KenPom, and all of a sudden, they just started stringing together, win after win, and it was in the ACC, which, you know, I think showed itself in the tournament that maybe it was a little better at the top than what people thought. But, you know, the wins almost were discounted as well. And once again, I think from a tournament perspective, you know, there's always, you know, maybe, you know, 2017, for instance, there was the Arkansas game, and you can probably kind of pick your different games. But this one, I mean, going into the first game, 3.5 point favorites, 8-9 seed was a toss up, and you had 3 weeks of just exhilarating action where, you know, the Baylor, you know, Marquette, they played so well. Baylor, they played so well, but then had the overtime. UCLA was a terrific game. You know, Duke was another terrific game, and obviously would have been nice to kind of have everything finalized with another banner and to kind of cap off with a championship. But I think everybody will remember the run and remember the growth, because I think the big thing over the summer was, you know, how much can these guards improve? Can they be like who we thought coming out of high school from an expectation standpoint? Or, you know, are they going to just maybe improve, you know, a small amount from last year? And I think it was really the guard, you know, the improvement of the whole team that you saw in different stages. So I think remarkable from a word association, but sorry, a few, you know, in terms of comparisons, I don't think there really is any. So it's a very unique team.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of the comparisons you guys threw out there, some folks in the YouTube chat have mentioned the Coach Gut 2000 team, which again, the parallels there, they're an 8 seed, had talent at positions, but just really kind of got hot at the right time. But boys, just a quick update. We have 123 folks in the YouTube chat now, which again, it's not the thousands that they've got on the beat before, but it blows my mind that 123 of you guys are in here hearing us do our thing live for the first time we've done it. So shout out to you guys. Keeping the momentum going, guys. I want to make sure, you know, we try to hit a couple of these major points for the podcast folks before we start trying to take some questions. But Sean, I want to ask you, why does this team feel different than UNC teams in the past? Sherelle, I'm deliberately making you wait to answer that. But Sean, why does this team feel different than past UNC teams? I mean, is it a talent thing? Is it because they're coming off of COVID? Is it just that the game has evolved? Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think just that it was the struggles they went through last year, just in terms of how the product on the court looked. And then even, you know, throughout the offseason into this season, and, you know, the losses that, you know, kind of came up during the beginning, you know, really throughout the you know, the non-conference and into the conference, that I think anybody watching felt like they were watching people grow up in front of them. And even though there was, you know, a lot of, especially early on, once again, probably the most used word we've done on the podcast was ball movement. And you go back to the first 2 months, there wasn't that ball movement. All of a sudden, little by little, it starts to pick up. The lineup, you know, I think we always used to make fun of Duke for having such a short lineup and not having legs come March. And here UNC is playing basically 5 people, 6 if they really need to, and all of a sudden, kind of an identity forming from, you know, the Iron Five and everything that they were doing. And once again, I think really starting to see a team click that you really did, you know, you really didn't think was going to click. It was an unranked team for 98% of the year. And all of a sudden they put it together and did it at the proper time. And I think people really enjoyed watching them grow and watching them play so well together, you know, in February and March.
Absolutely agree with that. Sherelle, I'm going to ask you the same question. And you know, you don't have to stay around the sentimentality of it, but I think that's just been a really cool phenomenon. Again, having been in New Orleans and kind of followed this team, maybe it was the juju in the air of New Orleans, but it just felt like this fan base, specifically, like just talking about people that subscribe and interact with us on Inside Carolina, it feels like this team is just different. This group of guys that have just, folks have gravitated towards them differently than in the past. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's a confluence of a few things that Sean hit on, that you hit on. I think first you take the COVID year with no fans. That was rough. It's something no one's really ever experienced in our lifetimes, and are unlikely to, I would think, moving forward. So you have that, no fans in the building, no connection, no, I guess that year was no late night with Roy, no exhibition games, no fun, no joy, just go out and play basketball because we need to fill these games for ESPN. Everybody needs to make their money, so just go play these games. That's kind of there. Then you have all the movement with the transfer portal last year, where someone who people thought was going to be the face of the Carolina program for a few years, like Walker Kessler, leaves. So I think for the people who stayed, because a year ago it was a lot different a year ago, and so I think because there was that threat of them leaving, and then they stayed, that endeared them to the fan base a good deal. I think name, image, and likeness does the same thing, because for the first time, fans feel like they have some ownership or control over the decisions of the players, because they're like, hey, if I buy this T-shirt for $20, maybe Brady Manick or Caleb Love gets $6 of it, and if we
Yeah.
extrapolate that and multiply it, then we can have an impact on those guys staying at the school I like. So there's that, and then I don't think this team would have been loved or one for the memories until that fateful day in March at Cameron. That changed. I mean, that changed everything, because at that point, let's be honest, that was the national championship at that point in the season. It was like, if
It
they can
was it
just,
was all a dream.
yeah, it was all a dream. It was like, there's no way they're going to go in there and do that and spoil it. And then they did it. And it's like, wow, amazing. What a great season for UNC. Great. Let's go to the tournament, lose in the second round, whatever. They beat Duke at Duke. Everybody was ecstatic. So they had that. But then the last, I would say, like, the last 6 weeks of the season, Hubert Davis talked about energy, effort, and toughness, and how he didn't want to coach it. And like I said before, they took it from something they didn't have and made it their identity in the course of 6 weeks. And I think that's a big thing, because what had been missing for a couple of years was guys diving on the floor and emotion, and guys leaving it on the court. And, Armando Baker in the last minute of the national championship game, hopping down the court on one leg, just trying desperately to finish. That kind of thing, makes the fan base happy. So you add all that together, and then a first year head coach with a new system, playing a different way that, most people hadn't seen before. For someone who's 21, all they knew of Carolina basketball was Roy Williams. So completely different style, even though there were similarities. So you get all that, mix it together, and then they go out, make the Final Four, and beat Duke the first time Carolina's played Duke in the NCAA tournament. So I think it was all that stuff mixed together, and it just created a connection unlike one I've seen from a team. I mean, people love the national championship teams, and people have love for, like, the '05 team for restoring balance and all that, but I've never seen the kind of connection between these guys. And that's the other thing. It's really, I mean, it's the whole team, but it's really those five. And I think
Yeah.
it's almost like the love didn't get spread over the course of like 10 guys, and it's all concentrated on five guys. So I think it's all that. That's a long-winded way of saying it's everything that's happened in the last 2 years mixed together. Then you sprinkle on a win at Cameron, and then you retire Coach K, and that gives you what you have.
That's a strong deep dive, man. I heard some folks at the spring game this past week, and kind of had a conversation with some people too. Shout out to everybody who's going to have a kid or a dog named Brady or Manic in the next 9 months. But I mean, I think that this team specifically, that Iron Five that you mentioned, these guys are going to be revered probably just as much as some of the title teams will. And I love that you guys couch things that way. Cheryl, I want to stay here. Going to kind of jump around on my prep sheet for a little bit. Why do you think Hubert's 4-out-1? Actually, let me go to Sean first, because this is a ball analysis question. I can see him salivating a little bit. Sean, why did Hubert's 4-out-1-in system serve this team so well?
I mean, I think, last year the parts just didn't fit. You had four players playing the same position, and even Roy Williams said on an interview, none of them could shoot outside of 6 feet for the most part. So I think going 4-out-1-in kind of came more into the modern basketball, which you're seeing in high school, AAU, NBA, et cetera. And once again, you had pieces that fit with the Brady Manick acquisition and the transfer portal. You could not have asked for a better stretch. I think there are obviously concerns defensively that were shown at times throughout the season of does he have the foot speed to play with a 4, and does that really help when say like Duke's going to put basically a small forward at the 4. But I think his shooting, he hit, I think 98 threes, which I'll have to go to Sherelle in terms of when somebody last hit that that amount of threes. But and it also allowed RJ and Caleb. Once again, I think even if they'd been playing in Roy Williams' system, I think we still would have seen that jump. But now you have them being able to kind of operate a little more freely and kind of attack those lanes, which once again, I think that's still an improvement point for both of them if they were to come back. But I think we saw RJ get so much better at finishing around the rim just with that space. And same with Caleb in the tournament for the most part. But, then you had Armando Baker, one of the top players in the ACC, who has a little more freedom to operate in the post. So we lost some offensive rebounding, but I think it just opened up the court and did a lot for this particular team where it fit, the pieces fit what Hubert was trying to do from an offensive perspective.
Sherelle, is there anything you want to add there, just specifically why, this 4-out 1-in system, though it had its slow start and it had kind of some hiccups to begin with, any reason why you feel like this worked so well down the stretch?
No, I think Sean nailed it. I mean, just the
that's why I asked him first. Good, let's move on.
Yeah, the combination of Armando and Brady Manick. I mean, that is the perfect 5-4 in this type of system, because not to regurgitate stuff we said for the last year, but Manick being able to pull out and go to the corner and be an automatic shooter just gives Armando so much space to operate, where before he couldn't turn and face and use kind of his ball handling skills and spins and everything. It had to kind of be back to the basket because there was another big on the other side of the block. So I think that's, Sean said it best. I think just because of how well Manick and Baycott complemented each other, I think that was a huge key for why it worked so well. And Sean, 98 threes is the second most in UNC single season history. Justin Jackson has the most with 105.
Whew, man, that's the other thing I know that Brady shot 40% for the year from behind the arc, which is absurd.
You remember he started off, he was not shooting well for a lot of the season,
no.
And then sometime in February the guy just went off and just stayed going off for 2 months.
He absolutely left this planet and remained in orbit for the remainder of the season. I'm also a big fan of the bang bang Mr. Falcon that he spouted, just because I love the swag that comes from that. I mean, I don't even know if kids are still saying that nowadays, but just the amount of onions that guy seemed to show in very, very clutch spots. Fellas, I want to stay here. Sherelle, which player do you think had the most intriguing? Wait a minute, pause. Shout out to the 200 of you that are already in the YouTube chat right now. Big ups to you guys. A lot of questions in the YouTube chat. We'll try to get to some of those a little bit later. Hey, you're asking about NIL. If you have NIL curiosity, go to Johnny T-Shirt and buy some of the shirts there that are designed to get some of the players some NIL money, which might influence whether or not they stay. I don't know. I'm not saying nothing. I'm just saying the kids get money if you buy some of those NIL based shirts. All right, Sherelle, what I was going to ask you, how many or who do you think had the best season trajectory or season arc? And that could be based on, development. That could be based on how they were playing within the team. That could be based on, game improvement, however you want to take that. Who do you think had the most intriguing arc over the course of the season?
Trying not to go. It's an obvious answer, but for me, it's Armando Baker. He went from being a really good big at the beginning of the season, who we figure would be on an all ACC team, to being the best big in the conference, arguably the best big in the country, and one of the best, tournament runs in NCAA history and North Carolina history. So he was already high on that trajectory, and it just kept going further. He was like, so when is this going to stop? And then he has, was it 15 and 16, 15.16 rebound game in the national championship game on one leg, basically one ankle. So for me, it's him, just because he had the one, well, maybe two bad games. He had like the game against Purdue, who has a lot of size, that he struggled in. And then I think he had a game in Boston College when he had some kind of finger thing going on, where he was like 3 of 10 from the field or something like that. But
Yeah.
for the most part, man, and he was just dominant game in and game out. And then he peaked at the right time, which was in the NCAA tournament.
That's always been one of the beautiful things about college basketball, and Dean Smith and Roy Williams are really good at it too, is getting those guys to gel and get the best out of them at the time they were needed the most. And when you mentioned Baycott, I don't know if, 6 double-doubles. He's the first player to ever get 6 double-doubles in an NCAA tournament.
In the history of the NCAA
in the history of
tournament.
ever.
Like that is not a small thing, considering, for at least the last 35 years, there's been 64 teams, and you
think of the
assume
names.
you assume that every team has 13 or 14 players. So you just start doing math, and he's the only one. I mean, that is phenomenal.
Yeah, there's been a lot of dominant big men that have played on national championship teams, which, of course, that 6 games predicates that you've either played the play-in game or you've gone 6 rounds to the title. And for him to be that guy alone atop the mountain speaks volumes to what you're saying about him having the most intriguing arc. Sean, same question, man. How do you feel?
It's you can really pick any of the five players. I think Sherelle hit it perfectly with Armando. I think RJ improved tremendously, but I'll go with a guy who I was often critical of in Leaky Black, because I think when he started, actually I was just looking on KenPom, so he actually finished with the highest offensive rating of anybody on the team. Obviously lower usage, but I think it was that Wake Forest game where we were kind of clowning on him for having a 10 rating or whatever. It was something unfathomable in terms of just not doing anything on the court. And then that next game, the Virginia Tech home game, where he came out and hit a 3 early on, and it seemed like everything just changed. Even attacking the basket, he had missed some very easy looks early in the year, and all of a sudden, now he's jumping off 1 foot and finally, throwing it down or finishing with contact. Defensively, he's stepping up and for the most part locking down some of the top guys. And I think just seeing his improvement, he finished 17 threes on the year. Now, obviously, we saw in the tournament, there were still teams that didn't respect him and played off of him. But I think compared to what was last year going into this year of, will he even get any playing time, under Hebert, and just kind of what he was doing early on in the season. And then really with that Virginia Tech game of just turning into a completely different player on both sides of the ball. And once again, kind of, you have 4 guys that can really score the ball, and you didn't need another guy that, needs 15 shots, but he was able to pick his battles, and he was able to contribute, which was a big piece in terms of UNC getting so far.
I love that you said that. I'm actually going to put my neck out on the guillotine with you, Sean, because I remember saying on this show that there were times earlier in the season where Leaky wasn't even the best defender on the team. And I don't know if that's where he kind of started, whether something happened for him, but at some point during the year, like you said, something clicked. And I know down the stretch here, he was an absolute blanket. And I think we saw what the rest of the team was able to do when Leaky Black is locking down the other team's best player and making it hard for him to do anything. The rest of the guys just they follow, but they also have more freedom to kind of gamble and be aggressive. And it's insane what he was able to do for this squad. Not really playing outside of himself, but playing at his best within the team. That's something that Roy used to always talk about. Again, shout out to over the 200 plus of you guys in the YouTube chat right now. I think it's absolutely nuts that you're here, and I'm thankful for it. And maybe, we'll we'll try to do more of these live. But okay. Next question is, and we've had some folks ask us in the chat, so I'm going to try to massage what I was going to ask you guys into what some folks are asking as well. Where does the program go now? And Sherelle, I think one of the big things is, Ben posted last night on the premium message boards. We don't want to give away the farm there, but I do think there's some understanding, or at least some sources that are kind of leading the IC staff to think some things. Where does this program go now, and how does such a run in the postseason potentially affect what the roster looks like next year? Sherelle, I'll come to you first.
I think NIL is the elephant in the room that has kind of changed things, because I think in the past there have been players who maybe had a great run in the tournament and for whatever reason either wanted to capitalize on it, test the NBA waters and all that good stuff. I mean, I can think of a couple who didn't. Donald Williams didn't. He probably should have, but he didn't. He stayed for another year. But excuse me, for these UNC guys, especially the ones who maybe don't have that first round grade, consensus first round grade, you start doing math. And I'm not saying money is the only thing, but it's very important to all of us. So you start doing the math and say, well, can I make more in NIL, at UNC? Or can I make more in the G League or on a two-way contract? And then from there, you have to say, well, okay, do I want to, play games in Des Moines and, Lubbock and
no slander to Des Moines and Lubbock, just saying.
No slander in Albuquerque. Do I want to play there, on Friday and then fly somewhere else on a Saturday for $100,000? When, if I stay at my university, we don't even have to talk about Carolina specifically here. When I stay at my blue blood university, I'm on a private plane and I'm the big man on campus, and I'm getting all the stuff that comes with being an athlete, and I have the ability to capitalize on my name, image, and likeness. So I think that has changed the conversation about some of the guys who maybe, like I said, don't have a first round grade. They have to consider that now, and I think they are. And I think for North Carolina, you talked about what does the run do for it? Well, millions and millions and millions of people saw Caleb make that shot over Mark Williams. Millions and millions and millions of people saw Armando Baker, kind of not quite dominate, but tough it out in the national championship game on one leg and almost lead his team to a victory. Millions and millions of people saw them go into Cameron and ruin Coach K's final home game. And with that kind of visibility and exposure comes NIL deals. That's the way it's supposed to work, is that when you do that, people are like, oh, well, maybe I can get so-and-so to endorse my product because so many people know them. That's how this is supposed to function, as opposed to kind of preloading deals into the system and just, spitting it out for people. So I think that's huge for North Carolina. That's the biggest thing for next year that this run has done, is it's kind of opened those guys' eyes, the guys who have decisions to make about the profitability that they can have at North Carolina, as well as the chance to, again, chase a championship. So that's the immediate thing. I think moving forward, what it does, and we've already seen it, we'll talk about this past weekend at AU tournament that we went to in Orlando, but you can already see kind of like, ooh, North Carolina, they went to the championship game and they're kind of fresh, and Hubert Davis and, his staff had a little bit of swag when they walked into the building, and people kind of looked at him like, ooh, that's Hubert Davis. So there was a little bit of that going on. So that's a positive. And then you start talking about the 25 and 26 classes, when, fans are made in runs like that. And sometimes it doesn't show up for a few years. Like you talked to Justin Jackson, those guys became fans of UNC during the Tyler Hansborough, Ty Lawson years. So that kind of exposure over the course of a couple of years can impact recruiting, especially for a place like North Carolina, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because they'll say, oh man, I was a kid when Caleb Love hit that shot, and I always wanted to play for Carolina since then. In 2026 or 27, we'll probably hear that. So there's a long-term gain to it, but there's also a short-term gain.
That's insane. When you were just talking about, kids thinking that I saw that Caleb Love shot. I think we all knew when we saw that photograph, and I still haven't seen who took the picture, but it's everywhere. Whoever took that photo, amazing work. And I think we all know now, just like we called MJ's first one the shot. I don't know what we're going to call this one, but the shot 2022, you know what you're talking about. You know exactly which one we're talking about.
So off script, I have to know. Caleb has the ball. Carolina's up 1. You're in the Superdome. You're what happens? Or you're near the Superdome. What happens when you see that shot go in?
It was one of those things where when he's bringing the ball up in the corner, and you knew what's happening. Like the announcers, and I can't remember if it was Grant Hill or if it was Raff, but one of those guys said, North Carolina's going to wait for 1 rather than trying to go for 2 for 1 here, and he holds the ball in the corner or whatever, and you start watching like, okay, this is going to be for Caleb, but if you watch, well, I mean, we've all seen Caleb Love play. You know who's taking that shot.
Yeah.
Everybody Caleb may be the last one to know he's taking that shot. So they had I can't remember. I think Williams was on Leaky Black, but Leaky was the one that had the screen for him, and I still to this day have no idea how Caleb had room to get that shot off over Mark Williams's 23-foot wingspan, but he did. And if you look at the shot from the bench side, where you still see like Mark, I still physically, it boggles the mind to understand how Mark Williams' hand didn't touch that ball. But all that to say, the timing of it was really good by Caleb. You could tell it's something that he's repped a lot. He got just enough room from that leaky screen to get his shot off. And, he did exactly what Carolina fans have loved and hated him for this season. So it was really, it was a perfectly timed crescendo to what he's done all season for this team. And, and again, the Tar Heels aren't in that position without him, and they definitely don't win the game without him, even if you take that shot away.
What about you, Sean? I'm just curious.
Like what was my reaction?
What was going through your mind in that entire position?
Probably a lot of nervous curse words early on, and then sitting on the couch, and as he starts going to the left, I start thinking back to UCLA, and as he starts his motion, I start getting up and putting my hands up and in my head being like, can he do it again? Can he do it again? And then the major celebration, because you go up 4, which obviously Duke comes down and scores again, but I mean, going up 4 versus even 3 is huge, knowing, how some of those leads have disappeared against Duke. And then obviously you had to hit those free throws, but once again, it kind of goes back to the emotion of this whole tournament, from the Baylor game of basically trying to talk myself into, how are we going to get on the next C2C and talk about this collapse, to the UCLA game being down for the majority of the half and not getting over it, and then he did it again. So it was me kind of slowly rising before a celebration.
Yeah, I was watching with my wife, and she doesn't watch as much as me, but she just gets nervous, and I was like, this is going to be a Caleb shot. I said the only question is if it goes in. I said, because this is what he's made for. This is what he always wanted to do. This is what Hubert Davis trusted him to do. He's the closer. And I was like, so the only question is, does it go in or does it not? And then
what is it Caleb said? He said it in the UCLA game. I'm him. Like he's that guy. He is him. He's the guy that's built and is in his mind is rep that shot. Guys, I want to kind of get to the EYBL stuff from this weekend. Before we jump back into kind of some postseason questions that we've gotten from fans. But when we're comparing and looking at holes for the roster next year, hold that thought. We'll talk about potential transfers and gaps in roster makeup in just a second. Cheryl, I want you to talk a little bit. You did a phenomenal write-up, you and Travis and Eric and all the guys who covered stuff this past weekend. I would love to see what you guys thought about specific targets this weekend. Everybody wants to ask about GG. You did a great write-up, so I will direct all the listeners there. I'm not going to play the reggaeton air horns here, but you saw Mattis Bazelis. You saw some guys in the 24 class in Jaren Stevenson, Drake Powell, and Cam Scott. Just can you share with us any of the highlights of those guys? And then again, I want to direct everybody, go read the premium message board, and you can read the entire rundown from the weekend in Orlando. From the live period beginning this past weekend. But Sherelle, any of those guys want to jump out at you, and if you want to tease the Zayden High stuff, feel free.
Well, I'll start with GG because he's whoever everyone wants to know about. But I think for us coming into the weekend, we'd seen him a lot with his high school team. We saw him a lot last year with CP3. We wanted to see how things would be different now that he is kind of the guy, because last year for CP3 he wasn't the guy. Dillingham was the highest rated, and Aiden Holloway was on there too. Jalen Curry was on there too. So it's still a very guard oriented team. And they run the offense through Dillingham and through Holloway. So we were curious to see how Gigi would handle it, because now he has expectations on him that he has to live up to as one of the top players in the class. And I think he acquitted himself well. The first game on the first night, he only had 6 shots, which kind of everybody we talked to was like, man, how does Gigi Jackson only have 6 shots? And again, it's because the offense for that particular team is run through the guards, because when they're on, they can be very, very dynamic. But then Saturday, really started to see him, the potential that he has as a prospect come through. I think we watched a couple of games. We watched actually 3.5 of his games and had to leave for the airport. The thing that impressed me the most, I think, is just his fluidity. The guy he's 6'9.5". Shouts to his mom, who wants to be clear that he's 6'9.5", not 6'9", not 6'10".
Yeah, mama.
Yeah, and he runs the floor so easily. He kind of glides. Everything just comes to him very naturally. And then he's really worked on some of the ball handling stuff. He's not there yet where he needs to be, where he wants to be, a top 5 type, pick in the NBA draft. But he's still got another year before he even graduates high school. And you just start to chart a course for him, and you see where he's at now. You see where he was last May. And it's just like, man, where's this kid going to be, next May, when he's getting ready to go to whatever school he's going to go to. So I think that was a big thing, is just seeing how much more room for growth he has, even though he's already a really good player. The ball handling, like I said, needs to improve. He didn't shoot outside much, but man, the kid, when he wants to get his nose dirty, he can really rebound. And that was one of the areas of concern I had for him after watching his high school team a bit. But I think it's just, again, those different roles, in that in his high school team, he is the facilitator. He's kind of the guy everything runs through. Whereas with CP3, he's more of a rim runner, defender, energy, dunker, finisher type guy. So it was a good showing from him, I think. And then the other one, I guess I'll highlight, we watched Jaren Stevenson, who is a 2024 forward with a UNC offer. He's from Pittsburgh. He's listed at 6'8", 6'9", somewhere in between there. And I think and growing. Ben Sherman actually has seen him more than anyone. And I think one of the questions on him was just, how hard is he going to play? Because the natural talent, is obvious. You can see it, the skill, very similar to Gigi, the fluidity, you see all that. But then this weekend, I was just so impressed with how hard he played. And he played mostly in the paint, which is a big deal for some of these guys, because in their mind, if you're 6'9" and you're an NBA player, you're a 3, you're a perimeter guy. And I think they just at times they can forget that, hey, I'm 6'9", I can still score over people, in high school basketball. I'm a lot taller. So he was doing that consistently. And he has the look of just a pro, a top 10 type guy. It's hard to explain. He always had the look, but the production wasn't there. And now it seems like the production and the motor are starting to match. So those two really impressed this weekend. And again, there's a kind of a full rundown on the premium board for folks who want to read it.
Sean, you want to give anybody kind of a recap of Jaren Stevenson's overall game and how he projects on the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Sherelle was saying, super talented and at that size and that age can already do a lot. From handling, a little bit of shooting, but just more the way he moves at that size, I think, definitely bodes well, and really that 2024 class locally is extremely strong. So once again, you're talking about a class that UNC had already really started to focus on, probably maybe earlier than in years past. And with that local talent, having that run that they did, I think only bodes well for what they can potentially reel in. But real quick, I'd love to go back. And I think he got hurt a little bit, but in terms of Simeon Wilcher and any of the games you watched of him, surreal because once again, that's just been high school and watching live streams or delayed tapes, things of that nature. But how tall is he, and what did he look like in person?
Yeah, so I would go to that, but I wanted, you made a good point about the local talent. That's the other thing. I think the big takeaway, there are so many good players in 2023 and 2024, and even starting in 2025 in the North Carolina area. So Paul McNeil plays for Adidas, a shooting guard from Lumberton. You've got Jaren Stevenson from Pittsburgh. You got Drake Powell from Pittsburgh. You got Cam Scott from down in Lexington, right outside of Columbia. You got Gigi, obviously, down in Columbia. I mean, that's a ton of guys. Then you have Isaiah Evans in Charlotte, who's another top 25 type kid. So there's just a ton of talent, especially on the wings in 2023 and 2024 in North Carolina, South Carolina, the Carolina's recruiting footprint area. As far as Wilcher, so he played one game, and that was the first game of the weekend. Ankle injuries in Carolina this week have been rough. So there's probably about a minute and change left in the second quarter. So EYBL plays 4 quarters. It's funny, the 16s play halves, the 17s play quarters. But it was at the end of the second quarter, just before halftime. He turned his ankle, and it looked pretty bad. He was limping. I was like, well, it isn't like he's going to be able to play anymore. And he kind of worked on it and got some treatment on the sideline and came back in. And he hadn't played well in the first half at all. I think he might have had 2 points, but he had a few turnovers where he was just driving into the middle of the paint and just with nowhere to go. And then it's like a flip switched sometime in the middle of the third into the fourth quarter. And basically he was still playing off ball, but they would put him in pick and rolls and get him in isolation situations. And man, the dude was just hard to keep out of the paint. I mean, it was like ferocious, angry driving into the lane. And he's got such quickness off that first step and speed that the defenders just couldn't stay in front of him. And he did that probably on 5 or 6 straight possessions where he would just come off of a pick and roll. He'd get the ball at the top of the key. He would go isolation and he'd be at the rim, half a second or a second later. So really impressive from him. He had a couple, pull up jump shots that I thought were good. So he looks the part, and he's legit 6'4", maybe even pushing 6'5", but his height is not exaggerated. So I think defensively he's gonna be a guy who likes to take on the challenge of guarding the opposing team's best wing too.
I mean, and if we've seen anything, that when North Carolina, and again, this was in an old system, but you saw it some with RJ and with Caleb Love this year. When North Carolina has a guard that you can't keep out of the paint, good things happen. Right. I feel like that's kind of a true statement for just about anywhere.
And you start thinking about him and Trimble together.
Yeah.
They both are going to have to improve as shooters, but if they just show a little bit of shooting ability, it's going to be rough for opposing defenses because both of those guys, Trimble's is more first step in athleticism, and I think Wilcher's is more kind of quickness. But either way, there is difficult to stay in front of him.
Absolutely. Okay, I appreciate you guys giving those notes. I want to kind of circle back to a lot of the stuff that that I see has been hearing, some of the questions folks have in the chat here. While we're here, shout out to the 307 of you that are now watching. Again, blows my mind that we decided to do this like within an hour of the show, and 307 of you awesome folks decided to spend some time with us tonight. So we hope you're enjoying it. If you are subscribing, or if you haven't subscribed to this YouTube channel, bang that subscribe button. For those folks of you who are not watching it on YouTube Live and are listening via podcast, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you subscribe, rate, review us, all that good stuff. It really helps. I'm not just saying that. I don't get paid to say that. Like, I'm just letting you know that when you leave good reviews, it helps. All right, boys, I'm going to hit some questions from, and I'm going to kind of go all over the place. I'm going to hit some questions from our chat, and I want you to try to answer them as best you can. Sean, I think one of the big things that folks saw in that NCAA tournament run was kind of a little bit of an emergence of Puff Johnson in a lot of different ways. Not only did we see him become reliable as a guy that can give you spot minutes, but especially in the Final Four. I mean, kid had some really big buckets, some timely buckets, some amazing defense. Played some great defense in that game against UCLA when UNC was in some foul trouble. When you're trying to project him for next year, one, how do you feel like or what are some things you feel like he needs to improve upon? And two, how do you feel like he fits into the mix next year? With what uncertainty we have around the roster right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think once again, last year for him was pretty much a red shirt of sorts, even early in the year. And the question was, is he ever going to get healthy? All of a sudden, he gets in a game and starts producing little by little, and at NC State, and some other games where he was hitting big shots. I think in the Kansas game when Leaky picked up his fourth foul, in my head I said, well, here comes Puff, and he'll provide a little bit better of an option offensively. And sure enough, when Kansas went on their massive run and had all the momentum, Puff was the one keeping UNC in the game. In terms of his development, I think he can kind of make that, not similar to RJ and Caleb because he didn't play as much as they did as freshmen, but he can kind of make that almost first to second year jump. Because I think, once again, what happens with the players that are staying or the transfer portal, there should be that increased opportunity for him. And I think he does, he shoots the ball well. He showed he could finish, he could play defense, he can get some offensive rebounds. So there's a lot to like of what he brings. And I think he brings a toughness that maybe wasn't expected out of him, because you saw, his 3-point shooting ability coming out of high school and kind of how kind of skinny he was. But I think there's definitely a toughness to him. So once again, I think a lot depends on the makeup of the roster of who stays, who comes in. But I think regardless of what happens, he has demonstrated that he is, even if it's not a starting spot, that he is deserving of quality playing time, and that he'll be kind of I think we talked about the 5 guys this year, but I think however many it is next year, he'll be one of those players, which is exciting to see that improvement.
And Sherrill, I'm assuming Puff still has 3 years remaining, right?
Correct. Last
Okay,
year was his freshman year. Essentially, He's still a freshman this year, and then he's got 3 more. Yep.
All right. Hey, one of the things that a lot of folks have asked, we're not going to speculate who is or is not going to hit the portal. I think a lot of that will become clear in the next, remainder of the week as North Carolina wraps up their player meetings. Sherrill, do you think the Tar Heels will try, assuming, if they were to have a scholarship open, do you think they're in a good place with a couple of potential transfers? And if so, what type of player might they look for?
Yes, it's difficult to answer because what type of player they might look for kind of depends on who leaves, who stays, and all
that's
that.
my bad.
But no, I mean, to your point, yes, if they have a scholarship, they're going to fill it in the transfer portal. I think Hubert Davis has made that clear. If you look at his quotes from his radio show last night, he talks about the transfer portal, and then if you just look at last year, he used it immediately to get 3 really good players, I think, or good players to come to UNC, and I think it's going to be a part of how they roster build moving forward. It kind of has to be, just because of the way college basketball works now. You have to be active, you have to be looking around. So it's not a situation yet where they are, I think, actively talking to anyone, because right now they don't have the scholarships. But were it to happen where they got down to 12 for next year, then certainly they would look to fill it. And I think Hubert Davis puts a premium on a couple of things, and I think passion is one of them. I think fit will be a huge deal. We saw with Brady Manick just how important fit can be and how much it can elevate the rest of the team. I think shooting is going to be important, whatever position you are. I think you need to be able to show yourself as a competent shooter. And then I think he's put an emphasis on defense. You have to buy in defensively. So the players, no matter what position they are, will kind of have to meet that criteria, I would say, to be able to, pique Hubert Davis and his staff's interest.
Go
ahead, Sean.
If I could just jump in, I think one thing, obviously it has to be so difficult to try to juggle everything in terms of being on the potential portal, as well as who's coming back. But I think, from last year, there was the 3. But I think, once again, from a fit perspective, and we talked about it beforehand, so it's not like we're just looking at this as revisionist history, but you basically had 3 three starters for two spots with Garcia, Manic, and Baycott, with two of them being additions versus, if that third addition had been somebody that was ready, which I thought McCoy could have been. Obviously wasn't ready this year, but if that could have been more of a, 7 to 10 minute guy comfortable in that role, I think would have been the ideal fit. So I think once again, it's just trying to figure out the fit as you go, but hopefully not potentially overload, positions. And that's probably something they learned this year, because once again, it took Garcia leaving for Manic to, kind of come into his own with the additional playing time.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Sean. I think it is a bit of a moving target for these guys. Cheryl, I want to ask specifically, a lot of folks are asking about Jalen Washington next year. I know UNC's typically been very cautious when bringing players back from injury. What do you think is a realistic minute projection for him based on what we know right now? I'm not asking you to look into the future, but based on where he is right now, do you think is the expectation that he will probably work nicely into the rotation, or is it just too early to say?
Yeah, I think it's too early to say. He's missed an entire year, his high school season, and then 2.5-3 years ago he missed most of the year with an injury. So I think he still has to his main thing right now is getting healthy and getting used to playing basketball again, getting used to shooting. We actually talked to one of his AAU coaches over the weekend, and he was just telling us how it seems like everything is actually fixed this time, and he seems to be in a good spot. They're doing work. I think we posted a few weeks ago video of him shooting, in the gym and just, back, playing basketball. But I think any minutes projection or anything, I think is just a little too early, because to your point, UNC, and if I'm wrong, y'all can come back and get on me, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be like, hey, no summer pickup for you, no practice or anything. We'll see you when we start practice at the end of September, and we'll see if you're a full go then. So he's not going to really do any kind of real quote unquote basketball stuff at full go, I would imagine, until late September. So it's just a matter of how he responds then. But the opportunity, I think, will be there because he does have the skills that Hubert Davis is look for. Hubert called him the best shooting big man in high school basketball. And so when you're that, there's going to be a chance for you to get on the floor if you can show you're healthy. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I think there's just too many variables that are unknown at this point to say whether or not he's 10 minutes a game or 5 or 15.
Well, and that's a little bit of a gotcha question too, because I'm asking you to read a crystal ball, but not use the crystal ball.
Right.
But I appreciate how eloquently you threaded that needle there, Sean. For a team like North Carolina next year, if indeed and there are rumors out there that Leaky Black is going to return, what does this North Carolina team look like if you have an opportunity to play two guys who can be really good defenders in Leaky Black and Puff Johnson at the same time? Because I don't think those guys were on the floor together very often. I think we saw it in brief instances in the postseason. But explain what that does for North Carolina's abilities on defense next year to have two guys like that can absolutely slow down other team scorers.
Well, I mean, it brings two guys with size and, once again, the ability to guard different positions. I mean, we saw Leaky pretty much go 1 through 4 in certain circumstances, and I think Puff can go 2 through 4 pretty easily just with the size. So, I think once again, in terms of is Puff playing the 4 or Leaky playing the 4 and one of them's playing the 3, that could be a realistic option. But I mean, I think having guys that can guard a variety of positions is what Hubert was looking for, as well as, especially with Puff, the ability to stretch the defense, kind of a natural shooter, and Leaky, that will be a continued thing to improve, in addition to his ability to, cut or find baskets off the dribble.
Sherelle, I have said this a couple of times in passing this year. Has there been a bigger crime for North Carolina fans, except maybe the Chris Jenkins shot, but has there been a bigger crime committed against North Carolina fans than only allowing them to see 1 year Brady Manick in a Tar Heel uniform?
Yeah, that's rough, man. I mean, it's Bob McAdoo, it's Cam Johnson, it's Brady Manning. The three best transfers in Carolina history. And I don't think how anyone could have any kind of argument against that. Maybe Wes Miller, but that was that kind of, kind of a different deal. But yeah, I mean, it was just as if, Hubert said, Lord, please let me get the perfect stretch four that can do every single thing I want in this new offense. And he was like, okay, go to Oklahoma. And lo and behold, there's Brady Manick, who only reason he really, I think, was available is because Lon Kruger decided to retire and go hang out with his son. And then the coach from Lower Chicago, Moser, put in a different system. And man, it's like, well, I got this year. Let's just YOLO. And I'm gonna go to Carolina. And I don't know if either of the parties really understood what they would mean to each other at this time last year. But what a phenomenal ride! And it is so frustrating because he was just ready made, perfect, like just came off the assembly line as the perfect thing to complement Armando Baker this year. And you talked about how endearing this team is to fans. I think he's a big part of it too, because he
Yeah.
he had no experience with anything North Carolina other than like, oh, that's where Michael Jordan went to school, that kind of thing. And within months, you could tell that he was 100% bought in and that he understood kind of the weight that you carry when you play for UNC. And he understood the gravity of being in the Smith Center and all that stuff that a lot of people maybe don't understand or take for granted. He got it, it seems like, instantly. And it really came through on the court.
But I think more for him. Sorry, I just
okay, go
had to
ahead.
jump in on Brady because we're not going to get to talk about him too much longer. But I think, as Terrell said, he didn't have any ties or attachment, but at the same time, kind of being that fresh, experienced veteran, I think is a huge reason why UNC was able to get it together. Obviously it was public in terms of the interview he had early in the year after the game of, this is what I came here to do. But you could also see, at that beginning of the year, he was the one we were talking about, hey, the ball's moving, he's seen things before it happens. And even though he wasn't shooting the balls as well, you always thought it was going to go in anytime it left his hand. And then, you started to see kind of his joy increase on the court as the team started to gel together. And I think just him leading by example, and once again, this is all, just my opinion from the outside looking in, but I think his play on the court helped others realize, how to play a proper team basketball and how to trust each other. And I think without that veteran and kind of steady presence, I don't know if we would have been able to, see what we did. And I just, I know he got knocked hard twice in the championship game, and I just wish he had been able to, get a few more shots in that game. Because when he hit those 2 threes in the first half, and even that tip in to go up one, that's probably the one regret I have, was just wishing he had gotten more shots. But at the same time, nobody's ever going to forget what he contributed to this team at a time of need.
It was go ahead.
He only had like 8 shots, right, in the championship game?
Yep.
Yeah, he was off.
I had the whole scenario in my head where they're up 1 after the dunk, and I was like, okay, they're gonna miss. Carolina's gonna get the rebound. I was like, they missed, and I thought Carolina's gonna get the rebound. I was like, somebody's gonna come down the court and hit a 3. They're gonna be up 4. Then Kansas is gonna come down the court, miss a 3. They're gonna get the rebound, and celebration time. And it was just like, if you listen to Hubert Davis's radio show, he was like, that ball has bounced to us every single time this entire season.
That offensive rebound.
Yeah, it was inches. He was like, it was just inches away from Brady. And, I don't know. To me, as a lasting memory, him putting up UNC up by 1 with a thunderous dunk. I mean, it's just, the kid was just perfect. I think we shouldn't take it for granted, because I don't know if you'll ever find that perfect of a fit that grows with the team as the season goes along, maybe ever again.
No, and we talk, and I remember sitting here saying after the Tennessee game, when you and Sean both talked about Brady calling the team out, and Sherelle, I think it was you that said the most Carolina player on the roster at the time was Brady Manick, was a kid who had 0 experience with North Carolina basketball. But man, it was really heartwarming to watch his growth and to see what he was able to do. I mean, there were times during the tournament where he showed some athleticism that I don't think he knew he was capable of. I mean, just, banging on people's heads and, rim running and all kinds of stuff that just, you get loose, Brady. Do what you got to do.
Yeah, and props to Hubert Davis, because that's not the same player that was at Oklahoma the last couple of years. Like, I don't care what anyone says. He looked different. He was doing different things. He was just a better player this year than what he was. And maybe you expect that in year 5, but I think Hubert Davis and staff should be given some credit for it too.
Yeah, and I think to a man, Brady Manick would say the same thing. I think he would say just something happened that freed him here. But hey, let Prairie Bird fly, yo. All right, a couple more questions and we'll get out of here. Shout out to everybody, the 300 folks who are still in the chat with us. Cheryl, is there anything that we can really talk about that hasn't been mentioned in the thread on the premium board that you want to kind of note or adjust?
Recruiting wise?
Just about next year and the offseason stuff.
No, I think we talked about NIL and how that is going to, I frankly help programs like North Carolina. We talked about that. And we're just awaiting decisions. And I think from there, we'll see if North Carolina has a scholarship for the portal. If not, North Carolina is going to be in the national basketball consciousness next year. I think it's safe to say. And that is a far cry from, again, like you said, Joey, where we were in February when the question was, is North Carolina irrelevant nationally? And they are no longer irrelevant. Examples on
Sean gets a pass on this one because you and I did the post game after the Pitt game.
Oh,
you and I both said well, it doesn't matter if they get in the tournament because they're not going anywhere. So Sean, you actually get to skate on that.
They're not doing anything of consequence, some person said after that Pittsburgh game. So whoever that is, that person's an idiot.
What a moron.
Just over the weekend, like I said, just in talking to recruits and stuff, every single one of them that we talked to mentioned UNC's run. Now, a couple of them we asked, but a couple of them brought it up on their own. It's like, oh man, one kid was like, oh man, if Armando doesn't get hurt, they're national champions 100%. And I was rooting for them. And then there was another kid was like, yeah, I watched the run. They went all the way to the championship. It was like they beat Duke, so it's all good. Just what one guy said. So it was really interesting because that hasn't been there in a few years, that excitement about UNC. So yeah, that was interesting. And I think the program just has a lot of momentum moving forward.
Yeah, and do you still feel like things are on the accelerated time schedule where once folks start either making their decisions public, that UNC will still move quickly, like you assumed a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, I mean, there are decisions are already made by some people. They just haven't been announced, and that was kind of how we phrased it in our offseason thing. It's like, yeah, we might not know exactly what's going to happen by Thursday or Friday, but UNC will have a pretty firm grasp by what's going to happen, or what's going to happen by Wednesday or Thursday. And I think for us, what we can do is track and see, do they contact someone in the portal? Because if they do, then that kind of tells us what they're thinking, that they're going to have a scholarship, which means that they would have to lose 3 people. So that's kind of how we look at it. But yeah, they're even if they aren't public, things are moving quickly because there are already some decisions that have been made.
And so, and last question, and we'll wrap the show. Refresh. Based on what UNC has right now, they would have to have some folks leave the program in order for, 3 you would have to have for all of the eligible players to return who could return to return. You would have to have some folks leave the program, correct?
Yes. So just real quick refresher. So NCAA allows 13 scholarships for men's basketball. If everyone who has some form of eligibility returns to UNC, they would have 15 players, and the freshmen, they would have 15 players on scholarship. So to get to the max, they have to have 2 people leave no matter what to get to 13. And then if they want to sign anyone in the portal or sign a decommitment or someone who's let out of their national letter of intent, they would have to lose 3 people. So they would have to get down to 12. So to be full at max, they have to lose 2. To be able to sign an additional player, they have to lose 3.
All right. There's your synopsis, folks. For those of you in the chat who have followed with us, again, 312 of you, that is so huge. I appreciate you guys showing up. Please understand, whatever Inside Carolina staff knows will be on the Inside Carolina premium message boards as soon as we know it and can confirm it. So just hang tight. There are all kinds of rumors swirling out there, but I think Sherelle and Ben and everybody have been kind of on top of this thing and have been very forthcoming when they had things that they could vet and confirm. So stick around. We appreciate you guys and engaging with us and asking these questions. So hopefully that helps. Sean, I always give you your chance for 2 pennies before we get out of here, man. What are your 2 cents that we didn't touch on this show? And I know we tried to cover half the continent in just over 60 minutes.
I mean, one guy we didn't really talk about at all was RJ Davis. And, I think just the growth that he had this year and how well he shot the ball, as well as kind of turning into that point guard, kind of the EYBL RJ that we talked about so much during the long COVID summer. And then 2, as I said at the beginning, really wish, as Sherelle said, we got that offensive rebound and had that banner and had that celebration. But I think, going back, whether they, nationally irrelevant, no excitement, things of that nature, we were looking at doomsday scenario of them getting bounced early, maybe some players leave. Next year is a rebuild year. Then there's a lot of pressure on that 3rd year for Hubert Davis. But I think, all that was changed in a matter of a month. And there's genuine excitement, from the fans, the players, the coaches, the recruits, everything. So, can't get the banner, but it was a tremendous and that keyword remarkable run that we got to watch.
Yeah. And I mean, you're talking about hanging the banner stuff. And I'm also wondering now, I mean, is this team one of those teams that doesn't need a banner? Are they who they are without the banner? And I think that might be part of their story, is they were that stinking good when it mattered and just came up just short. Cheryl, anything else you want to add before we put a bow on this?
I never do this, but I told y'all they were talented.
No, man. Hey, you know what? Good on you.
I never do that, but I had to get that in there.
Look, you said that at the beginning of the year, and a lot of the other staff at IC have hearkened to it and said, Sherelle was pretty dogged about how talented they were, and you know what, man, whether it's a blind hog finding an acorn or a one-legged man winning an ass-kicking contest, the propers are all yours, sir. So good on you for pulling this out and being correct on your assessment earlier in the year. If nothing else, you have all of the credence that you deserve, and I'm sure there will be more coming your way. You're right, man. No, that was a good call. You're pretty adamant that they were talented, and who knows? I do think it's odd that this team went from unranked to finishing the final AP poll second. I don't know if that's ever been done before, but that's absolutely absurd.
Somebody's gonna look in 20 years and like, oh, they finished number 2 that year. Okay, cool, and just have no context about how that happened.
Zero idea of how the sauce was made.
Right.
All right, guys, I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who is in the chat and rode with us tonight. All 300 of you. You guys have been rock stars. We may do this live in the future. Who knows? But again, as news breaks over the next couple of days, if you're not a premium subscriber, go be a premium subscriber. For the love of God. If there's ever been a time to subscribe to get behind the scenes stuff and news before anybody else has it, because I'll be honest, a lot of other people are getting their news from IC. I don't mind saying that. So go subscribe to Inside Carolina, be the premium subscriber, get your extra 10% at Johnny T-shirt. We appreciate you guys being a part of the show, the live folks in the chat. Those of you who are listening to us on your normal podcast or viewing us on YouTube later on, we're thankful you're here. Remember, subscribe, rate, review. We appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Sean, Sherelle, man, you guys are always the class of the league. I appreciate you. And we will talk to everybody sometime down the road. This has been the Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. I'm Joey Powell. Late. All right, hang on, fellas. Thanks everybody for being in the old YouTubes there.